Today is Friday, May 1st, 2020. Good evening, good afternoon, and welcome. My name is Sean Maroney, and welcome to the first ever Global Diplomacy Dialogue brought to you by International Focus. Now, the goal of this, as we are all scattered apart, is to really continue the mission of International Focus, so the local nonprofit here in the Triangle of North Carolina, is that we want to make sure that we continue face-to-face diplomacy with our guests and friends that we have met over the years, hosted perhaps over the years in our area. And so we're planning on doing that as a weekly Friday session. And tonight, for our first ever event, I would like to give a special thanks to Aruna and Tilak Shah for being this evening's sponsors. If you're interested in sponsoring, please reach out to International Focus Executive Director Layla Bekri, and she will love to talk to you about that. And tonight, for our Global Diplomacy Dialogue, we are joined with journalists from Europe. And I would like to welcome our guests from Berlin and Warsaw. I will begin first with Marco Büttner. He is a television journalist and the head of the political department of RTL Television in Berlin, Germany. Marco, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
And we also are joined from Warsaw, Poland with Wojciech Cegielski. He is a foreign news correspondent for Polish radio. Woj, welcome.
Good afternoon or good evening, Marco, as we are at the same time zone. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be with you all.
Well, we are really pleased to have you. I would like to remind everyone who is joining us, well, to again welcome the newcomers who may have joined us now after we've reached the top of the hour. We will have a portion at the end of this hour discussion for Q&A. I just request that you address your chat to me. So when you go down on your Zoom program to C2 in the chat window, just select me. I will be able to see your questions, and I will make sure that I ask our panelists those questions. But first, I wanted to just give a brief introduction of what you both participated in when you joined us back in 2010. You were both Edward R. Murrow participants, a program developed by the State Department. Tell us more. I'll start with you, Marco. What did it mean for you to be selected for that prestigious program through the State Department?
It was definitely a surprise and a big honor. It was 3 weeks traveling through the U.S., beginning in D.C. and then going down to the South. My first time being in the South, for example, going through all the Triangle area, then over to Denver, and then back to New York City. And doing that with a group of European journalists from all over Europe. That was fun. It was super interesting, and a giant experience, I have to say. Really, still profiting from that network as well till today. Really.
And Woj, you were in the same class as Marco, so you two were colleagues while you were here in the Triangle?
Yeah, exactly. We started our program with, I guess, over 150 participants in Washington, D.C., as the group consists people from all over the world. But then we split into the groups. This is why we met with Marco in the same group as the group of European English-speaking group. So this is why we traveled all the way, as Marco said, to the Triangle and then to Denver and New York. So yes, this is the reason why we met together at the same group. And well, we had, as Marco said, I couldn't agree more. It was a giant experience to be selected, to be honored, to be selected for this kind of prestige program. That I have to admit, I wasn't fully aware of this of this prestige. I mean, I knew that it is something really special, but I discovered the privilege of being a Edward Murrow alumni the years after, when I came back to United States, to Triangle as well, but also to the different other parts of the US.
And Marco, you're no stranger to the US. You actually spent some time here before you participated in the Edward R. Murrow project. Am I right?
Yes, totally right. I did my civil service instead of going to the German military abroad in Pennsylvania, close to Philly, working with people with special needs on a farm. And we had a barn as well. So I, as a city kid, I grew up in Berlin, never really left the city for a longer period of time. And then, yeah, I found myself close to Philly on a farm, milking cows, and all but one cow actually survived.
You grew up in East Berlin, correct?
That's totally correct. I grew up in East Berlin. I was born and raised in East Berlin. My mother was involved with the civil rights movement in East Germany, Germany just before the wall went down. As soon as the wall went down, actually, I changed sides in Berlin and went to school in West Berlin, or then former West Berlin, I have to say. And then I actually was able to spend half a year also in Toronto going to school in 11th grade. So that was my first time that I actually changed sides of the Atlantic. And well, yeah, that was kind of my initial point where I really got to love this side, your side of the Atlantic.
Yeah. And Woj, where you work in Germany, essentially it's the NPR of Germany. Give us a little insight of what you thought about. I understand that you went and saw our local public radio affiliate while you were here. What is your impression of the type of journalism that you saw while visiting the Triangle?
Well, the structure is completely different because in Poland and in most of European countries, it's not the structure of NPR like divided between different states. It's rather one central part of the broadcaster, whether it's TV or the radio, and the local affiliates. So it's even the different mindset, which I was trying to fully digest in terms of TVs as well, but also as well as the NPR structure. Well, if we have in mind that we both with Marco are coming from the ex-communist background. Marco, as he mentioned, he was born in the East Berlin. I was born in Poland, close to Czech Republic, but we were in our childhood, we were living in a different, on a different planet, also in the media term. Marco remembers very well, me too. We had one or two main national channels, TV channels, 2, 3 national radio channels, and that was it. So for us, of course, we were teenagers when the Berlin Wall came down. So when we entered our professional careers, the media landscape both in Germany and in Poland was very different. I remember our first commercial radio station in Poland when it was launched. I was in a secondary school those days. And that was really fascinating because as a digester of a radio, I couldn't hear something like this before during the communist times. But still some, I would say, mentality difference remained. Maybe even in Polish perspective, it's stronger than in Germany when things were in Germany. You, as Marco knows much better than me, things are not so centralized as in a different in another post-communist countries, like in Poland. We still have public radio and public television with its headquarters in Warsaw, in the capital. And in the different parts of the country, there are just affiliates who are rebroadcasting the program, I would say. So on this local level in Poland, there is a really different type of journalism. While, for example, in Triangle, when we visited RAL TV station, I remember meeting David Crabtree, and we were talking about his coverage of a different foreign affairs, which is not very common in Poland for the journalists from the capital, from the HQ, I would say, to cover, for example, the foreign affairs. So that was one difference which strikes me at the first moment. And the second thing is that, I always valued the American school of journalism, so to say, in terms of very detailed coverage, in terms of a detailed process of gathering the information, of checking the information, and this kind of a mission in terms of the let's say servants of the people, but not expressed very directly, but in the process of doing it, not calling it as a mission, but doing it as a mission. These are the first thing which strikes me when I was in Triangle, and when I saw this couple of the radio and TV stations together with Marco on the program.
And Marco, to give a little more perspective for your job at your station, RTL Television, it's a national broadcaster. You're the head of their political department. You've worked your way up there. You have a very strong grounding in political reporting that even extends, I understand, to here in the US back in 2010, 2012, previous elections. Is that right?
Please, again, the audio wasn't very well. What was your question, exactly? Sorry, Sean.
As the head of the political department at RTL Television in Germany, you've worked your way up through that whole unit. You have extensive knowledge and experience in reporting politics within Germany, but also I understand you had some experience when you came to the US reporting on the politics that you observed here. Was it back in 2010, 2012 during those elections?
It was back in 2010, but I didn't do any reporting because the State Department actually didn't want us to report firsthand. So I was basically just an observer back then. And I just wanted to refer to what Wojciech actually said about our experience growing up on the eastern part of the Iron Curtain. Berlin was a little different because we were able to watch West German television and West German radio. So whenever we watched it a lot, of course. I grew up with Sesame Street, for example,
so did all of us.
yes, and I loved it. And
One thing we have in common.
Yeah. And whenever we came to school in East Berlin, and we were talking about whatever we watched on television, and one of our teachers would pass by and hear us talking about it, they say, well, you watched the wrong program. And even before going to school, one of my earliest memories is my mother sitting in the kitchen listening to West Berlin radio. And there was always at noon, there was a Liberty bell ringing from the West German side via the radio. So that is one of my earliest memories. So I grew up in the East, but I hardly watched East German radio or TV. So I mainly grew up like someone from the West, media-wise, at least. The rest was totally different. Yes, it was a different universe.
What do you think your trip to the U.S., what do you think that you brought back from that trip and have applied in your experiences reporting? Marco, why don't you start?
Well, I remember that in Chapel Hill, we had a talk in the journalist department, and during that talk, I thought for myself that I do a lot of covering and managing that covering, but what I actually want to do is uncover and not just cover, and that was a very strong thought I had that when we were having this.
So be more proactive instead of reactive.
Totally, yes. I mean, that's the interesting part of journalism, not just covering, but actually finding out, uncovering things. Yeah,
That's an interesting field in politics for sure.
Oh yeah, plenty to do. Always, never stops. What was interesting as well is that looking back from now to 2010, that the situation we have with Corona was kind of comparable to the situation we had with the financial crisis. In Europe and Germany especially, the financial crisis back then was a crisis of the financial system, of the banks. It wasn't so much a crisis that affected the people very much. And that was at least one observation I made in the US, that it was totally different there. It really affected the people. People lost their jobs, people lost their homes, et cetera, et cetera. So that was totally different in Germany. It was a crisis of the system, but not so much of the people. And the US back then, that was totally different. Now we have a crisis that affects us all. It doesn't matter how high your bank account is or not. A virus doesn't have a motive in that way. So it's interesting to have that kind of bridge from the financial crisis to the Corona crisis, with a lot of similar effects in a way.
There have never been as many humans on planet Earth as we have today. And so just by virtue that the coronavirus is literally affecting everyone, this is the biggest of anything to ever affect humanity is right now with this. Woj, how does this affect the situation in your country? How does it affect the way you cover the news? How do you report in light of COVID-19?
Well, right now I can only tell my observation on the COVID in Poland, as I am covering the foreign news desk, and I'm dealing partly also in the with the situation in the United States, let's say throughout the world rather than in Poland. But if I may add one thing to what Markov said and to what your question, Sean, was on our output from the trip. Of course, as we went to Chapel Hill to visit my favorite journalism school, of course, with we had a lot of meetings there, and we had a lot of inputs from the American journalistic school, so to say. So of course, every one of us who was active, who was listening, who was open on this meeting, brought back home many different experiences and many different things to share or to practice in everyday life. But what's also was important for me, that it was the time of a midterm elections. So for sure, and it was the time when the name of a Tea Party appeared on the stage. So of course, it was very interesting interesting time for us to observe the whole political process with the new players inside of it. It was the first 2 years of President Obama, so this midterm elections were kind of a test check for him. For
referendum on hope and change to see if whether what he ran on was actually affecting the voters.
And this kind of an input we've gathered in Triangle, especially when we spent the election night as well, was the invaluable, the thing which we could not get from anywhere else. Because I've learned some of the specific and schemes and rules of the American politics. And I mean the rules of the social rules of the race as well. How important is the race issue? I remember we had a extremely interesting lecture with Professor Jim Johnson, who I was interviewing him 2 years later during the presidential campaign in 2012, because I was so impressed by the race issue, how it plays a role overall in the American politics. So it was a kind of a input when we could not read it in newspapers, on some policy papers from the even American think tanks in the internet. You have to live, or you have to be there for this couple of days, and you have to meet these guys, these people, these professors, lecturers, but also these American voters who we've had a chance to meet in the during the elections, to get this insight. And for me, it was one of the, I guess, most important things when I was covering presidentials 2012 from the US 2 years later. Without this input, well, I guess I could be much more blinded, I would say.
It added a bit more context to how you were viewing it.
Exactly. And your question was on COVID-19. So let me add that, of course, we are, well, learning from each other right now. I guess in terms of my perspective, the most important thing right now, which I'm trying to deal with on an everyday basis of my work, is to be very factual, something which I've learned as well in the Chapel Hill, and to try to see the things from the different perspective. As Markov said, to be proactive, not only to cover the events, but also think about the consequences which COVID-19 might have, let's say, in the Polish, Central European or European economies. Not to try to predict them, because I am not an expert, but to think about the stories which might be very interesting within a week or a month time frame. To try to set up some kind of, let's call it, agenda which might be important. To try to predict it might be important, and try to cover it as early as it could be. Not to be proactive, not to be reactive, and to follow the other outlets, but rather try to think about what we should do next as a journalist, what kind of things we should cover, or what kind of answers, what kind of questions we should answer with the help of expert think tankers, whoever it will be.
You know, you raise an interesting point, Woj, is that, at least from my perspective, no longer being in the media, but just working out in the community, just for a small business to try to figure out when the situation was changing by the hour, it seemed about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, to now, there seems to be some sort of quote unquote normalcy that has been reached. But it was scary. And I can't imagine as a working journalist how one could appreciate that and respond to that. The Wall Street Journal, rather, they had an article today that looking at Germany itself, saying that Germany was a card player, dealt a lucky hand, and played it well in all of this. Even now, the median age of folks who are affected by COVID in your country is well below the median age of other EU countries. How has it been, from your perspective, working in Berlin in all of this?
Well, it affected every part of my professional and also of my personal life. If you would have told me not even 3 months ago that my daughters wouldn't go to school for months, that I would have to hunt for toilet paper for days in the supermarket, that I couldn't travel freely within Germany, not even to mention abroad, that the German car industry would go on a full stop from one day to another, which makes about 10% of Germany's economic power, that 95% of all air traffic would just stop. I mean, it's only 5% of the usual air traffic in the air, that my kitchen would become my new office. If you would have told me all that, not even 3 months ago, I would have called you insane. It wouldn't have seemed possible that something could affect us that much. And professionally, it's, of course, I mean, for journalists, it's one of the most interesting times of our lifetime, I'd say. And my professional career started as a student assisting the chief correspondent just before 9/11. So that was a very strong impression I had back then, of course. And now it's the unnormal has become the new normal in a way. People get impatient naturally when it's going to ease up again, whatever. That's not going to happen soon. And professionally, my company, just before Corona actually broke out, had a first concept of home or mobile office that would allow each coworker to work from home for 5 days each month. And I was on that side saying, well, if you don't work on a daily basis, you can work from home. But if you do work on a daily basis for a daily product, it's not possible to work from home. Well, I was corrected overnight because overnight my company basically put almost 3,000 people into mobile or home office without having all the equipment, without having enough laptops, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, yes, it's those times are, the government is always in focus in these times as acting and being responsible. The opposition gets noticed less in these times. Numbers are going up for the government like crazy. I mean, it's insane. Merkel's Conservative Party had improvement ratings of about 27%, which is quite low, and is now up within weeks up to 40, which is a very good number in Germany, 40%, considering that we have 6 parties in parliament here. But yes, on a daily basis, we basically don't do anything the same way we did it before Corona. It's very hard to meet people. We do Skype interviews on TV, which was definitely a no-go before that. Definitely a no-go. And now it's totally fine. Everyone is accepting that the quality is quite miserable. The technical quality, not the content quality, is not that good. Every background talk, every whatever is going through video conferences. On Monday, on Tuesday, I had, I think, 16 video conferences in my calendar, which is quite insane because that's just not manageable. My everyday life has changed totally with the family. We have 4 kids, so that was quite an experience, having 2 boys home aged 3 and 5, and my teenage girls. So my role also at home changed. I wasn't just a father and a husband, but also a teacher and a kindergartner, and a maintenance guy, because when you have 2 boys home all the time, a lot of things break. That is, but we're getting through it, and it's getting better since the boys are back in kindergarten again, which is quite a relief in a way, I have to say. And things don't break that much anymore. Yes, so it changed every aspect of my professional life. Things work totally different, but they work, and that's quite surprising, I have to say. Yes, communication, and that's the major thing we do, is more complicated. You can't just turn around and talk to someone sitting in the same office. You have to call them. You have to call them many times a day. But it works, and it works surprisingly good, I have to say.
Well, Woj, your experience now working from home, how has it affected your home life? And I understand you have frustrations with certain aspects of it. You're covering the briefings from the WHO, am I right?
Yes, exactly. Well, as a guy who deals with the foreign news, Not exactly every time as from the trips which I'm making, because it's obvious for many of the journalists, but I'm not sure if it's a daily basis routine for all our listeners and viewers right now, but not everything is covering from the place. Especially in the European media. If there is one story, not a big story in let's say Egypt, not everybody is sending the crew to Egypt. So some of the things which we are covering from the wires, from the press agencies, which we have agreement to, same as in television. But so basically, I was a bit, let's say, experienced in the working from home, or rather, I would say, working remotely. The same thing goes to the trips which journalists are making. Well, I remember when I was in 2013 in Lebanon, there was a time of the chemical attack in Ghouta, in close to Damascus. And as we all remember, President Obama said that if the President Bashar al-Assad will cross the red line, then it will be answered by the US. There was a time when all of the journalists from all over the world were stuck in Beirut, in capital of Lebanon, 2 hours drive from Damascus, waiting for a Syrian visa, which of course we were not able to get. So basically, we were reporting from our different sources, different informations from Beirut, what we've heard on what we've read about Syria. So in the term of many outlets throughout the world, the office has moved basically to Beirut, where we were waiting for 2-3 weeks for the visa to Syria. So it was, for example, the time when I was experiencing this kind of a working remotely, not from the field, but basically from the hotel, because we were not able to reach Syria, of course, and nobody was interested what's going in Lebanon, because there was a peaceful time for Lebanon those days, of course. So for me, the situation with COVID-19, when I haven't been to my company headquarters since 2 months. It's not a relatively new experience. However, I have to say that, of course, it affects the life, because I also have to take care of my wife, my daughter. Well, every day we are trying to learn some new skills, some new experience, kind of our own schedules, which are well, basically we are trying to get used to this kind of a new routine. In terms of the WHO press conferences, they are the toughness to cover it. It's the timing, because press conferences, except for President Trump, who is famous for the long press conferences, but we can say that the average of the press conference is, let's say, 30 minutes. So in terms of WHO, it's minimum 1 hour, with a lot of different, very specific questions. If you are not an expert in the science, in the public health service, you are not able to understand everything. Sometimes it's extremely tough to stay put, to listen to this press conference and trying to be very cautious if there is not something very important appearing in the 41st minute of the conference, with for example, perspective of the dinner which is just waiting. Or once I had a situation when I had also the Zoom conference with my university exactly at the same time. So I just put 2 different laptops trying to get things simultaneously. I'm not sure about the quality of the coverage of the WHO, but I was just looking at the different press agencies of the urgent informations which they are putting on the air, and trying to check if I'm not missing something. but yeah, every day you are trying to get used to and to have this kind of new skills, also the technical skills which would make it easier for you to do it.
It is just so fascinating to hear both the similarities as well as the differences in how in your countries you're each experiencing COVID-19. And I know, seeing at all the participants here today and from my own experience, how we're experiencing it here in the Triangle. It's fascinating how it doesn't matter if you're on the other side of the world or on another continent. The challenge is the hunt for toilet paper, the hunt for ground beef, perhaps. It knows no boundaries. And now I'm looking at all the folks who are participating right now. We're nearly 30 participants. So welcome to each and every one of you if you're now joining us. Thank you for coming to our very first discussion, our global diplomacy discussion. I now want to invite anyone who's participating to send me in the chat any of your questions. I will direct it to our panelists. If you aren't able to figure out how to use the chat window, if you're on a computer, it's the easiest way to do it. You just kind of scroll down to the bottom and the options will pop up on your Zoom, and just click chat. In the to, select my name and send me your message, your question. And I will make sure that we ask our panelists. We're going to have just another 20 minutes. Gentlemen, thank you again for your time. I know you're giving up your Friday night to be with us. I know you probably have a million other things, especially considering you're at home with all of your families. And Marco, four kids.
Yeah, four of them. Yeah.
So it sounds like you're playing fix-it and dad and teacher first, and journalist has to come second. I imagine that there's several folks who are watching this right now who are thinking the same things.
Well, definitely. I mean, yes, I was never really a big fan of mixing up my professional life and my personal life. So I most of the times kept it very much apart. And now I'm even making video conferences from my home. So yes, you adapt, you change, and it works well. The first weeks were quite hard also for my wife, because the day started at 6 and ended sometimes at 10 or 11 at night. Lots of extra hours. That has calmed down, so it's getting in more normal lines in a way. But yes, you change. I mean, and I also found out that there is a reason I became a journalist, and one reason is that I'm not good in math. Trying to solve my daughter's homework. So yes, we're good. We're good with words, but bad with numbers.
I understand that as a recovering journalist myself. Our first question from our audience is from Susan, and she has a question for you, Woj. How does Poland view civil discourse or civic dialogue? And she asks if you have your own opinion you'd be willing to share about it.
I guess, thank you, Susan, for this question. I guess you mean the dialogue, civil dialogue on in the times of COVID-19. Well, there are different opinions, I guess the same as in the US right now. There are many people in Poland who value this civic dialogue, and especially in the time of Corona, of civic actions as well. As we all know that the health service is struggling these days, maybe on a different levels in the different countries, but in Poland as well, we don't have as much cases as the I would say top countries in the world. However, there are of course shortages in the Polish hospitals. So this is also the place when the civic dialogue and the civic action comes into place. We've seen a lot of charities. We've seen a lot of different Facebook groups who are trying to deal with certain problems which are appearing on a daily basis as everywhere regarding of the specific of the country or in the city. So it's I guess it's time it is the time when people also in Poland, but I guess it's exactly the same in the States, they value this civic dialogue much more than before. And of course, it goes sometimes in connection with the government, sometimes it has nothing to do with the government, and it's apart from the big politics, who, as everywhere, is very heated these days as well. I guess we've passed the first stage when everybody was just focused on, in politics, how to deal with the crisis as the first, I would say, wave appeared. Then politics went back to normal, or let's say quasi-normal in some areas, the same as in Poland. So the politics life goes on with these circumstances, of course, but this civic dialogue is really something which is being uncovered for the next stage, I guess. And let me stress it once again, it's very often in Poland not connected to the politics, except the heated debate on social media. But this is just the debate. The real action goes in a different way.
I have a question that I want to direct to you both. It is from our guest, Short Stuff. Short Stuff has informed me that is the pet's name of this individual. This is a retired diplomat who moved here back in 2011. But Short Stuff asks, what, if any, has been the reaction in your countries to President Trump's threat to cut off U.S. funding to the WHO?
Well, I know that the German government wasn't amused, and so that's all what I can say about it. I mean, yeah, it's the same with trying bleach against Corona. It doesn't always make sense.
Well, in case of Poland, we have to remember that the Polish government is very close allied with President Trump. So basically, there was not a single reaction from the government, except maybe some politicians, some not the most important politicians, asked in some radio or TV interviews about the cutting the funds or perspective of cutting the funds to WHO, who were just trying to calm the things down. But basically there was no heated debate on it. Also, one has to remember that the thing which was much more emotional here in Poland was rather the funds or the money flows back from Brussels. I mean, the common European Union funds who were also diverted in the different sectors because of the COVID-19 as well. So if we would like to find some kind of a debate, it was rather to the issue of the Brussels funds, but no very meaningful reaction from the Polish government on the President Trump's threats for I guess an obvious reason.
Marco, I have a question that I want to start with you. It's from John. And he prefaces his question sort of with an explanation of what this administration here in the United States has been known for as an American first policy. Essentially, America will make many unilateral decisions, often without input from global partners. How, in your reporting on politics from your country, how do you see that policy affecting the relationship between the EU juggernaut of Germany and the United States? And then Woj, and Marco, feel free to answer this part as well, but Woj, I'm curious, has there been sort of a soft power vacuum from the US in Eastern Europe in regards to all of this?
Well, America First changed a lot in Europe. And it made, I think, Europeans, especially also Germans, more aware of that they can't always rely on America solving also Europe's problems. So it brought back the awareness that Europe, in a way, definitely has to also care for itself. The European Union, for example, it doesn't really have a strong foreign policy. It doesn't have a common, real foreign policy. We don't have a common European force, armed forces, for example. So we're basically really relying on NATO, relying on the US. Who do you call if you want to call Europe right now? You can call Paris, you can call Berlin, and you will have a different perspective. You can't call London anymore, for example, if you want to call Europe. If you call in Warsaw, you definitely get a different answer than in Berlin or in Paris, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it brought back the awareness that Europe has to take care of itself, basically. And not meaning Europe first, but maybe not anymore Europe fourth or fifth or sixth. So in a way, I see it. I see it partially positive, seen from the European perspective, that Europe is beginning to change from not only being a political and economical union, but also getting a sense of what do we need to solve ourselves. I mean, Libya, for example, is the perfect example when actually a conflict in front of our basically door had to be solved in the beginning by the US, and then was basically handed over to the Europeans, and well, it didn't really work out. It's complicated, definitely complicated.
Complicated to say the least. Woj, what have you observed again with any sort of soft power vacuum in Eastern Europe in regards to, or have you seen anything?
Poland is in a different, I guess, position than most of the Eastern European countries because of the close relations, which I've mentioned, between the Polish government and President Trump. We also can remember very well President Trump, who in July 2017 came to Poland and make a speech about Polish history, Polish heritage. And he
How was that received?
Well, the surprise thing was that it was very well received, and he pleased not only the right-wing part of the political spectrum, I would say. Of course, there was the debate of what the outcome for Poland might be, but the Polish government insisted since the day one of the relations with President Trump that the relations between Poland's Polish government and any American president has never been closer than as with President Trump, which is true because basically Poland is one of the hotspots in which is the focus of the president in Central Europe. But this is why the situation is different than other part, except Hungary. But this is also a different thing. So there was never any soft power vacuum here in Poland because the president was here, as I've said, in 2017. Polish president visited White House twice since 2017. There were a kind of a new agreement with the US, but also within NATO for more US troops. The issue of security was very important for most of the Poles, even not connected to the government. Also the visa issue, which was the Poland was admitted into the visa waiver program recently. So it was also for some reason it was also the topic of the very heated debate in Poland within the last 10 years. So resolving the issue was kind of a factor which was maybe not, it could replace soft power. But in the last weeks during the COVID-19, one thing which I guess has changed is the soft power of China, as China is trying, as in every part of the world, trying to soften its image, trying to redirect the attention from the origin of the virus in Wuhan. And I don't want to say Chinese virus, but as the fact that it all started in China on the issue of whether the China has dealt it in a proper way or not. So we can observe also here in Poland, but throughout the Central Europe, in Czech Republic as well, very intense soft power efforts to try to ease the situation and to try to make an influence of the image of China. There are a lot of Polish Chinese companies, think tanks, even in something which was unprecedented before. And one of the main Polish daily, there was the interview, or there was the letter from the Chinese ambassador to Poland. I guess it was a month ago, maybe. Which was unedited. They just put the letter which was
a rip and read.
Yeah, exactly. And the letter consists of how the China is trying to share the experience with fighting the COVID-19, and how China is trying to help the other nations, like with the transport of tons of medical masks, etc., etc. So it was in an obvious way, it was a soft power, and this is the thing which appeared in such a intensity within the last week. Previously in Poland, there was nothing like this.
Well, it's interesting, Woj, that you bring up China, because there's been a lot in the chat, questions sort of regarding y'all's view on how China has been handling this or been involved with the coronavirus. There's also been questions about all around the world, all we've been talking about is coronavirus. There's obviously more news out there, more pressing issues, and quite frankly, more diverse issues that are affecting different populations, different countries. I read this week that the African swine flu is actually a topic of discussion between both of your countries. Back in 2018, a quarter of the world's pork population died because of it in China. And now it's seemed to have spread to Western Poland, and there's fear that it could spread to swine farms in Germany. Gentlemen, do you have any thoughts on that? And are there any other issues that you think from your perspectives where you're reporting now that our audience should be mindful of as we adjust to the new normal and start filtering out so much corona all the time?
I mean, the big question is what happens after corona? What is the world looking like after corona? And yes, I mean, there's many subjects right now that are not really being monitored closely by the media because, yes, we're mostly about Corona and the effects of Corona. So I'd not say we're not only talking about the virus because it has so many aspects of social life, of security life, of economics, and et cetera, et cetera. So I can understand that it feels like we're only talking about Corona, but Corona has so many aspects that we're basically talking about everyday life. But yes, I mean, if you look at the situation in Greece with the refugee camps, and a situation that is definitely not being solved, same as Syria, et cetera, et cetera. Those conflicts are only on halt, but not really solved, but are not really playing a big role. But yes, there will be a time after Corona. There will be a time when Corona is less the subject, but the effects and the leftovers of Corona. Unemployment is going up and will go up dramatically if this continues for the next months, which has many social, economic, etc. implications. So we're definitely going to see that the focus from just the numbers of Corona and how many died and how many are infected and when is which cure going to come and who's drinking which bleach is going to change to all the effects it will have, which will be related to Corona, but the actual subject will be different than Corona. What I find very fascinating is how quickly we adapted in our lives to that new situation and how absurd certain things suddenly appear that were before Corona normal everyday business. I'm not going to fly for a 2-hour meeting to Cologne to our headquarters anymore after that because you can do that via video conference. They were invented before Corona, but hardly used. So I don't know how many hours I spent on board of a plane flying to simple meetings of 1 or 2 hours. That's not going to happen again. That's only a small detail. I think other things will change as well. How do we pay and perceive the people that are now actually run the system, that run the hospitals, that take care of the elderly, that still work in kindergarten, taking care of my sons right now. Jobs that are not being well perceived before Corona and were definitely not well paid before Corona. I hope that will change as well. So that's for me is a big issue. How what can we take with us in times after Corona, and what can we change? What needs to change actually? I mean, simple things like Germans like to pay cash. If you try to buy in your local bakery your buns and try to pay with Visa card or whatever, that wouldn't happen. That's changing now because nobody wants to touch money. So things that for ages, because we always did it that way, they're changing now very fast, and that's only simple things. There's other things that will change as well, and I'm very curious, and I'm actually kind of glad. I know it sounds kind of stupid, but kind of glad that I will be a witness of that, and I'm really curious what will change.
Well, that just shows why both of you are good journalists. This is to be a journalist. And you're right, we're living at one of the most fascinating times that any of us have ever experienced. Wojciech, what do you think on down the line? Any stories that we should be cognizant of from our venue, our perch here in the Triangle in North Carolina?
Well, I will be very briefly on one issue because you all know it much better than me. You all know you're much better experts on the US politics, but let me just mention that just before the pandemic, as the November US general elections approach, So we had one meeting in the radio in my company, trying to think out what kind of coverage, except the normal news coverage of the US elections in November, we would like to have. I mean, except the pure news and covering the conventions and all of the electoral process. What kind of ideas we would like to put into the overall coverage. So of course, this paper is right now in the trash. And I'm really curious, even listening to, for example, the New York Times podcast, The Daily, on the Joe Biden's new way of appearing as a candidate. I guess it was 2 days ago. So we are starting right now in a very early stage to reshuffle all of the plans that we have to cover the US, to prepare and to have some ideas to covering the US elections. But whatever kind of an input some of our team is trying to put, it's all about COVID-19 for obvious reasons. So that shows also that, well, whatever kind of ideas we had just before, our coverage will be on COVID-19. But of course, in my company and in the I guess every media outlet all over the world, there are debates and discussions on the different angles of what might and might not change during the next months or even years. But well, I guess, I mean, I wish that one thing which could remain, like journalists, the kind of skills we've all had to make during this this time, maybe not a pleasant time, but still, I discovered so many aspects and so many tricks in the software programs I'm using to mix my audio bytes or even the video bytes. Well, I was even thinking of buying the green card to the room to have this kind
No,
of
don't hide all those books. Don't hide all those books.
but these are the kind of these are the kind of skills which we are trying to get into. Well, for example, it's obvious that in the radio, in the headquarters, they have the best microphones, the stationary microphones, when we could record our speech. So right now I have the software which is trying to electronically improve the quality of the ordinary microphone. This kind of skills, I hope it will last much longer, not because we would like to work from home, but it will, for some way, not the technical only, but also as a merit, it will improve our journalism, I guess. What I'm worried about is if we will not adjust too much to the working from home, even it will not be possible. As in our job, in our work of reporters, journalists, the best way to cover the story is to meet the person. And I know I can try very hard, and I did it many times in recent weeks, to get some kind of a story of a certain human being online, but as the stories of being in quarantine or living through the COVID-19, it's quite, I guess it's quite okay to do it online, because there are some circumstances and these are some kind of extra added emotions with it when you are contacting the people online who is just in self-quarantine and haven't seen any human species live for the last week, for example. But I'm worried if we will be able to return to this normality in terms of meeting the living ones, the people, to such an extent which would allow us to maintain the level. Marco mentioned that on the technical levels on doing an interviews online. We can improve the technique as much as we can. We all got brains and hands, of course, but the question is how much of the level of journalism, of the professionalism of the journalism will disappear because it will be cheaper to do it online from home. It will be faster, simpler, etc.
Well, gentlemen, as we say, that is a great way to kind of wrap tonight's discussion. You certainly put a button on every topic that we discussed, Woj, Marco. Gentlemen, Marco Büttner with the RTL television in Berlin, Wojciech Cegielski as a foreign news correspondent with Polish radio. Gentlemen, I know it is just after 11 p.m. your time. I want to be cognizant of the fact that not only are you working, but you are also working fathers, working husbands. I want to get you back to your other duties over there. Thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate it.
Thank you as well. It was fun.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and it was a pleasure to reconnect with North Carolina again.